Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Damme and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today I want to tell you about my absolute favorite 20 movies you can currently watch on Netflix. So subscribers will know that I just did a list like this for Amazon Prime. Now I'm on to Netflix, and in that video I explained I don't normally do videos like this. I try to steer you towards movies maybe you haven't heard of. There's a few of those on this list, but there's also some that everyone has seen, and I'm just taking this video as an opportunity to talk about my absolute favorite movies, starting with my number 20 pick, Green Room. And particularly for my international viewers, if you find that not all of these movies are available in your country, odds are they are not, today's video sponsor, CyberGhost VPN, will be able to help, and I'll tell you more about that later on in the video. But Green Room is a really great thriller. It's only a few years old. I loved it when it came out. It's from director Jeremy Saulnier. It's his follow-up to Blue Ruin, which is also one of my favorite movies on Netflix right now. But Green Room, I think, is just tighter. It's more successful in terms of a thriller. And this is about a punk rock band that does a show for a bunch of neo-Nazis out in a barn out in the woods, a nightclub. And then they witness something in the green room that they definitely should not have seen, and they are not allowed to leave the green room. They become prisoners, and this whole thriller unfolds. It's graphic, it's intense, it's raw, it's really well directed by Saulnier, really well acted as well. Patrick Stewart plays a great bad guy as the leader of this Nazi gang, and Anton Yelchin is sort of the lead character in this, and it's one of his last movies. He died before it was released, and it's a great one for him, a great performance, a great role. I just really like this type of movie, these raw, gritty thrillers, and Green Room's just a kind of like a perfect example of the genre. Magnolia was just recently added, and this is director Paul Thomas Anderson's follow-up to Boogie Nights. Boogie Nights got a ton of praise from critics, and the studio basically gave him director's cut on whatever he wanted to do next. They were like, just write it, we'll fund it, you can do it. And he packed it with stars like Tom Cruise, Julianne Moore, Philip Seymour Hoffman, John C. Reilly, William H. Macy, and a bunch more. And what you get with this is a bunch of separate stories that tie together really well in a very, very unique way. Now, the only reason this one's so far back is it's not as tight as it probably should be. It does get to be a little bit of a chore to watch this one. However, I find all the performances really interesting. All the characters are great. The cinematography is great on this one. It's just really interesting and unique, yet it's just a drama. Like, there's no shootouts, there's no real sex, there's nothing kind of crazy happening in this one until you get a little later in the story, but it's just so well delivered and so smart. It's one of my least favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movies, but still, it makes this list.
Hi.
Hello.
Not you. Hi.
Kingpin is one of my favorite comedies on Netflix right now. I love everything about it. I love the fact that it's about bowling. I love the Amish angle. I love the core cast with Bill Murray, Woody Harrelson, and Randy Quaid is great in this as well. Just a lot of funny bits. One of those movies that, yeah, I thought it was funny when it came out, but over the years I've watched it more as it's been available on TV and streaming services, and it's always a fun watch. This one has become kind of more of a classic in my book over time, and you know, mention everybody else, but Bill Murray really stands out in this one and just really kills it. You don't get much of him in the movie until later on, but it's really just sublime comedy acting from him, and one of my favorite performances from him. Not necessarily my favorite Bill Murray movie, but one of my favorite characters that he's done. The Rainmaker is based on a John Grisham book, so there's a great start there. It's got an amazing cast with Matt Damon, Jon Voight, Mickey Rourke, Danny DeVito, Claire Danes, and then you add the fact that it's directed by Francis Ford Coppola. Coppola. Now, this is one that is a great movie and people still like it, but I don't think it's really known to be a Francis Ford Coppola movie. It's not one of his core pieces, yet it's really well directed, and it's just sort of a pitch-perfect adaptation of a really great courtroom drama novel. Not only is it a good courtroom drama, not just in the courtroom, but all the pre-trial stuff, all of that's great, but then there's really great moments and little side stories that play out really well. If you love true crime stuff, especially courtroom stuff, The Rainmaker is, I don't want to say as good as it gets, but it's up there.
Please remove any metallic items you're carrying, keys, loose change. Holy shit!
I have to include The Matrix on this list. This was one of the first DVDs I ever owned, and I practically burned a hole in it. Now, yeah, I was watching it on like a 13-inch TV, yet I could not get enough of this movie back in 2000, probably when it came out on DVD. This was like me right at the age where I was starting to consume these like rated R action movies, and it was brand new at the time, and it was different than anything else, and it was just one of those things I could watch over and over again. I loved everything about it. I loved the aesthetic, I loved the story, I loved some of the shootouts, and even to this day, the lobby shootout is really ranked as probably a top 10 shootout in movie history, not just because of some of the slow-mo stuff. It's cut together really brilliantly in a way where you know the geography of the room, you know where people are standing, who's shooting at who. That's very tricky to do in action movies, and The Matrix nails it, not just with that scene, but with a lot of the action scenes in this movie.
Now they can foreclose on Friday, so come hell or high water, get the money to the bank on Thursday, and then you are free and clear.
Hell or High Water is another recent thriller. I have talked about it on the channel a lot. There's gonna be some repeats on this particular video, but I'll be back soon with some more hidden gems. But Hell or High Water is such a fun heist movie. The cast is great on this one as well. Ben Foster is one of my favorite character actors working today. Chris Pine is surprisingly good in it. Not that there's anything wrong with him, but for him to jump from Captain Kirk into this and have it not feel like you're watching sort of this big franchise star, I thought played out really well. Like, he fit into this smaller movie really well. Some of the little characters that pop up for just one scene, like the waitress in the What Don't You Want scene, just sort of make the movie. They make it rewatchable. They make it shareable. This is another one. I say this all the time. I've showed this movie to friends and family. Everybody that has watched this movie with me has loved it as much as I have.
Do you remember this?
Now, Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive is one of my favorite movies to have come out in the past decade. I loved everything about this one, and I'll talk about this one a little bit longer just because I do love it so much. I love the style of this one. I love the music. I love the aesthetic. I love Ryan Gosling's really sort of old school performance, sort of this like quiet man sort of performance that he does with this one. I was a Mustang owner at the time that this came out, and there's a badass Mustang chase in it. I really loved everything about it. And in addition to all of that, I had previously heard Quentin Tarantino talk about the experience of watching Taxi Driver in the movie theater back when it was released. Now, I'm not comparing this to Taxi Driver. However, there are some similarities. I first saw this opening weekend in a crowded theater, and there is a very graphic scene in an elevator. Those of you that have seen it know what I'm talking about. The audience laughed, and that is something Tarantino talked about with the violence in Taxi Driver. It's sort of a nervous response that we do in groups, and I got to kind of see that happen, and I didn't think much of it at the time until I went and saw it again in a much less crowded theater, and that same exact scene created dead silence in the theater because we weren't in a large group. It was a very interesting social thing, and I had heard that that has happened with some other landmark movies like Taxi Driver, and so getting to experience that sort of made this movie even more special for me in addition to all of the other stuff. So this one's got kind of a special place for me. By no means is it a perfect movie, but aesthetically, it's a perfect fit for me. And just because I know some of you are gonna ask in the comments, yes, there is a giant scorpion on the back of this jacket.
I speak, you do not speak. Your job is just to sit there and look innocent.
Well, I am innocent.
That's it. That's exactly how I want you to look. Can you remember that? Look in the mirror if you have to.
Another courtroom drama that obviously tops The Rainmaker for me, as its position on the list, is Primal Fear. Not only is this a great courtroom drama, but it's a really great mystery, and it's a really great thriller. Like, it's much more intense than The Rainmaker. The Rainmaker has some heavy scenes, but all of Primal Fear is heavy. Richard Gere plays a high-powered lawyer in this one, and this was a very early performance for Edward Norton, and it was really a career maker for him. Now, he went on to have some other landmark roles, but this one really sort of solidified him as a major player because it's a very intense role that he had here, and he nailed it. It's one of his best performances, in my opinion. And in this movie, Edward Norton plays an altar boy accused of murdering a priest, and then Richard Gere represents him in court, and there's this whole case that they build, and you go through it. It sounds a little bit like watching paint dry the way I'm describing it, but the scenes are so good and they're so interesting, and the story itself is so compelling. And then ultimately the conclusion, it's got one of the best conclusions in this genre ever, which is why I've got it ranked above a movie like Drive that I gushed about for way too long on this video. One of the better gangster movies from the 90s, not directed by Martin Scorsese, is Donnie Brasco, which stars Johnny Depp and Al Pacino. The thing I like about this one is that Al Pacino has this really great role that's sort of like not a parallel to his role in The Godfather, but it's sort of like a polar opposite. He's a low-end guy on the mob that's aging, that hasn't really made anything of himself, and I think sort of the duality of those two roles is really interesting that they exist in his career like that. And then this is one of the better, more serious roles for Johnny Depp. I think it's just a really great gangster flick, and it's one of my favorite genres, and this is one of my favorite among them. You know, it doesn't stand out like Goodfellas or anything like that, but still very rewatchable and very enjoyable from beginning to end for me.
Do me a favor. I want you to hit me in the face.
What?
I want you to hit me in the face.
Forget about it.
No, I want you to hit me in the face. Go ahead. Go ahead, take it back.
I said forget about it. I ain't doing it.
Speaking of Martin Scorsese, Raging Bull is not really a mob movie, even though there are some mob connections that I find really great, but it's one of those great De Niro, Joe Pesci duos. Everyone was talking about The Irishman this year. I haven't talked about it on the channel because I still haven't figured out how I feel about that movie and how it fits into Scorsese's other movies, particularly the De Niro Pesci ones, but this is a great one, and I know how I feel about it. This is another one that, yeah, the story's compelling, it's interesting, the performances are great, really well directed, all of that. But in addition, you just get these really great scenes that, yes, they sort of help the character arcs and stuff, but they're not necessarily part of the story. The whole opening scene in Jake LaMotta's house where he's arguing with his wife, and then his brother comes in and he tells him to punch him in the face. It's one long scene that kind of doesn't go anywhere, yet it's so important, and it's also so entertaining. That's what I love about this movie, is that it's compelling and it does not forget that the movie is supposed to entertain you. And that's too often what happens with these heavy dramas, is they get too bogged down in their messaging and the drama and the performance, and they forget to kind of have a little bit of fun and be entertaining. And Raging Bull does not forget to do that. All right, before moving on to the top 10, I mentioned for my international viewers, if you like my recommendations but you find you can't watch them in your country, you can if you use the sponsor of today's video, CyberGhost VPN. Not only does CyberGhost protect your web browsing, but it also enables you to access specialized servers optimized for viewing Netflix. And you can do that in multiple countries. So if you're in the US, you can watch Netflix in the UK and Germany and a couple other places. If you're somewhere else in the world and you want to watch Netflix in the US, like the movies I'm talking about, use CyberGhost to do that. They have 24/7 customer support. They have a 45-day money-back guarantee, so if you find it's not working for you or you're just not getting good use out of it, they will refund you, no questions asked. I have been using them for a while. I find it easy to use, and I find it a great way to access more movies with my existing Netflix subscription. If you're interested, there is a link in the description, and you can get it for as little as $275 a month when you use that link. But moving on to the rest of the list, Moon is a sci-fi movie starring Sam Rockwell that I have really loved for a long time, and it's one of those movies that has sort of a big reveal in it, the type of reveal that sort of like spoils it on a second viewing. However, Moon is so smart in the way it's pieced together that it's still very engaging and entertaining to rewatch. And it feels like a small movie because it's kind of a Castaway type thing. You're dealing with one solitary man manning a base on the moon. And Sam Rockwell is one of the best actors to pull that off. He's so charismatic and so interesting. He can be alone and really deliver the entertainment and the performance that you need to drive forward the story. And this one, I know a lot of you like it. I talked about it back like a year ago when they added it, but it's been a while since I've talked about it. And when making this list, it just really stood out in my mind as sort of belonging in the top 10. I'm actually a little surprised I put it above Raging Bull, but that's how I felt at the time that I made the list.
On my challenge, by the ancient laws of combat, we are met at this chosen ground to settle for good and all. Who holds sway over the 5 points?
But speaking of Raging Bull, I've got another Martin Scorsese movie on the list. I get it. Maybe that's a cop-out, maybe it's boring, but he's far and away my favorite director of all time. And Gangs of New York is one of my favorite Daniel Day-Lewis performances. It's not quite realistic. The movie itself, the set design, the costume design, everything's embellished just a little bit, and so is Bill the Butcher. He's got like a flourish to him that's not quite human, not quite real, and again, it just makes for a very engaging and entertaining performance. I love most of his performances, but Bill the Butcher really stands out, and it overshadows like a great performance from Leonardo DiCaprio, great supporting performances from other people, including Liam Neeson, and really badass battle at the beginning, some other fights that go on. The aesthetic of this one and the time period is just like, the movie's almost 3 hours. Yet I can watch it and it doesn't feel that long. This is one that I watch every few years and I enjoy it every single time. All right, my next 2 picks came out kind of close together and they were like some of my favorite theater experiences I had in college. And the first one is Kill Bill Volume 1. Now, I don't hate Volume 2, but I far and away prefer Volume 1. I love the way it kicks off. I love the way it ends. The Crazy 88 battle is amazing. The dialogue is better in it. It flows. It's bloodier. There's the anime section in the middle. It's just bang, 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 bang. I remember seeing it in the theater and really just being blown away. Now, I was already a fan of Quentin Tarantino. I loved Pulp Fiction. I didn't know anything about Kill Bill going into it because I was like first year of college and I wasn't paying for cable at the time, so I knew nothing. I just knew I wanted to see the Tarantino movie. It was like a party. It was wild. People were screaming in the audience. It was just a ton of fun. It stands out in my mind as one of the like best times I've had sitting in a movie theater, and I've loved this movie ever since because of that. And then maybe about a year later, maybe 18 months or so later, Sin City comes out. And I didn't know really what to expect with that either, but it looked cool. I liked the cast. I liked that Bruce Willis was in it. And I knew I liked Robert Rodriguez movies. I was a big fan of Once Upon a Time in Mexico. I thought he did such a great job with action and again, just keeping things entertaining and fun. So I was excited to go see it, had no idea what I was getting into, and I've talked about aesthetic on this video. I love the aesthetic of Sin City more than anything. When this one came out on DVD, I could not stop watching it. I loved the music, I loved to look at it. Mickey Rourke's performance and his face was great. The special effects with the high contrast and the black and white was great. That hyper real neo-noir thing was just wild. Benicio del Toro's performance was fantastic. It was just another one that was just like, I couldn't believe what I was watching. It was so much fun and it felt so fresh and new. And then ultimately, I was absolutely disappointed by the sequel. And not only did it take too long for it to come out, but there was no pizzazz. It was, I think, just a snooze fest and a total missed opportunity. In fact, I don't know that I've really liked or at least loved any Robert Rodriguez movies to have come out since Sin City, except maybe Planet Terror. Catch Me If You Can just recently got added to Netflix. This is a great Spielberg movie. In fact, Catch Me If You Can, Minority Report, and Munich are really the only Spielberg movies I've really enjoyed this century, like since 2000. And Catch Me If You Can is just a load of fun. Again, I keep saying it on this video, but these movies do not forget to entertain you. Yes, it's good storytelling. Yes, it's good performances. Yes, it's good production design, all of that. But the relationship between DiCaprio's character and Tom Hanks is really great. It's one of my favorite Tom Hanks performances in a really long time, because I think he has a lot of fun with this character, and the movie itself is just fun and it has an energy about it. Not to go back to another director, but that's why I haven't wrapped my head around The Irishman yet. I feel like it was lacking the energy that Scorsese's other gangster movies has, and Catch Me If You Can has like that Goodfellas energy, that fun, like, yeah, we're committing crimes, but it is a blast type of energy. And I really enjoy that on screen. All right, my next pick has that energy in the first half and then really just dives into the depths of hell in the second half. But Trainspotting is about a bunch of heroin addicts, and they are having the time of their lives when the movie starts. And then as you get to the middle, you start to see how things unravel. And this movie does something really brilliant where it actually uses the same footage where they've just committed like a B&E and they're running down the street from the cops. They use that same footage in the very beginning, and they do it to like Iggy Pop, and it's fun. They're on heroin and they're just having a blast. They take that same footage in the middle of the movie, do it to a blur track, and it's very dark. It is a sort of a fork in the road moment where they've gone too far and they've sort of lost themselves. I think that's brilliant. I think the soundtrack to this is brilliant. I think the colors and the characters and the again, just the vibe of this whole thing is absolutely brilliant. Danny Boyle is a fantastic director. He's done a ton of great movies, including Yesterday, which came out in 2019 and everybody loved and didn't really know who directed it. He's a very good director. He did 28 Days Later. But Trainspotting, I think, is his masterpiece. It's only, I believe, his second feature, and I think he's never gotten better than Trainspotting, even though he has come close a couple of times. Inception just got added as well. Another caper flick that I just think is so brilliant in a number of ways. Now, you can break down the dream stuff. Some of the logic doesn't work, but it's still pretty brilliant in the way that he tells it, he being Christopher Nolan. But the movie's brilliant just in the way it plays out. And some of the wild stuff that happens, the hallway sequence is one of my favorite pieces of film from this century. Every time Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character goes like flying through the air as that van is backing off of the bridge, like the air just exits my lungs, like it just knocks the wind out of me. It's so cool, especially on the big screen. This is another one I distinctly remember seeing in the theater. And the movie, again, is just fun. It keeps moving. Tom Hardy's character is a lot of fun. Obviously, the visuals are great, but Christopher Nolan knows how to put together an entertaining movie like very few directors know how to do. We just talked about Spielberg. Spielberg knew how to do it with another pick I've got coming up on this list and some of his other more career-defining movies, but Christopher Nolan's one of the guys working today that just knows how to put something together that mass audiences love, and Inception is one of the better examples from him of that.
What do you get, your period?
All right, we're in the top three, and I promise this is my last Martin Scorsese pick. That's why I normally don't do lists like this, but these are my favorite movies on the platform right now, and The Departed has been one of my favorites since it came out. I anticipated this for years. It's the first movie I ever took my wife to go see. I think we had only been dating like a week when this came out. And then I just think this is one of the best composed movies I've ever seen. Goodfellas is my favorite all-time movie. The Departed came close back when it came out. It came close to surpassing it, but it hasn't quite held up with time. However, this movie is cut together so tightly. Yes, it's long, but it just moves in a way that The Irishman I don't think does. I think The Irishman sort of drags out and it's got a slower pace. The Departed is just bang, 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 bang. almost in a way that's disorienting, but Scorsese is a genius and was able to sort of thread the needle on this one and keep everything so tight and so together where you never lose track of where the different characters are in their lives. And it seems like chaos, but it works so well, which is why I've loved this movie so much for so long. In addition to it just being a great crime flick, a great cops and robbers flick, great performances from legends like Jack Nicholson. I know some of you will try to argue that Infernal Affairs, the original that this is a remake of, is better. It is a great movie, but it is not as expertly put together as few films are as The Departed is. Number 2 is my favorite Western, and I love Westerns. This is my favorite Western of all time, Once Upon a Time in the West. This movie has one of the best intros ever made. If you don't like watching older movies, but you love my recommendations, do yourself a favor and watch the first 10 minutes of this movie. Watch this up into the introduction of Charles Bronson's character. It's very slow, but if you're watching it, it's amazing. Not only is it visually beautiful, this old train station, but all the little idiosyncrasies that are happening, just from water dripping to a fly buzzing around. It's just amazing storytelling. It's really, really expertly done. And then you just get this really great epic Western that follows this fantastic opening, some great little music cues. If you're a fan of Tarantino's work, this is a must watch because movies like this have heavily influenced the types of films that he makes, and you will appreciate his movies more if you learn to appreciate movies like Once Upon a Time in the West. And I know after all of that gushing, this just like gush fest we just had, what could be number 1? And it is Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's right, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, not Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. That name was added years later to sort of tie together the trilogy, but when this was released, it was just released as Raiders of the Lost Ark without the Indiana Jones name on it. I love this one. I love Indiana Jones. I love the whole trilogy. In fact, The Last Crusade was one of my favorites for a long time, and I really still love that one, but as time has gone by, I really appreciate Raiders, mainly because it was so fresh when it came out, and very much like Tarantino, the way Tarantino takes movies that he loved from decades ago and then sort of like reworks them and sort of introduces them into a new audience. That is what George Lucas and Steven Spielberg did with the Indiana Jones movies. They took these old adventure movies that they grew up on and loved and sort of like reworked them and made them into this summer blockbuster defining thing that is so rarely topped. It's very difficult to come up with a movie in any given year that competes with just the quality and the entertainment value of Raiders of the Lost Ark, making it my number 1 pick of all the movies on Netflix right now. If you have movies that you absolutely love that you think people need to watch, let us all know in the comments below. But I will keep making videos like this one as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for watching this special episode, and you will see me with some hidden gems very soon. I'd like to thank all of my Patreon supporters. I really appreciate all of their monthly contributions, but here is everyone donating $5 or more a month. Their names being listed here in the credits is one of the benefits. If you'd like to see what the other benefits are, there is a link in the description. But as always, thanks for watching.
You didn't think it was going to be that easy, did you? You know, for a second there? Yeah, I kind of did. Silly rabbit. Tricks are for kids.